The Chinese bride thought no one desired her until a lone rancher whispered, "Will you marry me?" The village had no schools for girls beyond a certain age, and opportunities for women were few. Every day, she watched her brothers play and go to school, and she wished that she too could have the same chance to learn. But her life seemed already decided. She would grow up, marry, and take care of a family of her own, just like her mother. From a young age, she noticed how people in the village looked at her. She was quiet and shy, and unlike some of the other girls, she was not particularly outgoing or loud. She often stayed in the shadows, watching, listening, and learning from the lives around her. Sometimes she felt invisible, as if her presence was nothing more than a shadow on the wall. Her relatives, though not cruel, often made remarks that cut deeper than they knew. "You will need to marry well," her aunts would say. "Not everyone will want a girl like you." The words made her stomach tighten and her heart ache, but she said nothing. Her parents, though loving, were tired and burdened by the weight of poverty. Her father had a hard time providing for the family, and her mother had long days with little rest. The girl understood that her life was not about her wishes or dreams. It was about helping her family survive. She often helped her mother with chores and worked in the small patch of land their family owned. She learned to cook simple meals, carry water, and sew clothes from old fabrics. Her small hands became strong from labor and her back ached sometimes, but she never complained. It was the life she had and she accepted it quietly. The village had a custom that girls should marry young, usually by the time they were 16 or 17. Families often arranged marriages, sometimes nearby and sometimes far away. For a girl like her, options were limited. The thought that someone might marry her not for love but for convenience weighed heavily on her. She had seen girls in the village leave for other towns or even countries, promised to men they had never met. Some returned happy, others sorrowful. She could not imagine leaving her home, but she knew that someday she might have to. One day, a marriage broker arrived in the village. He was a middle-aged man, well-dressed and speaking politely, who claimed he could help families find husbands for their daughters in other lands. He said that families in distant countries were looking for girls from China to marry men who lived far away from towns and villages. The broker promised good homes and financial support for the families. Her parents listened carefully, and after some discussion, they decided to meet him privately. The girl, curious but cautious, overheard the conversation. They spoke of the family's debts, of the money that could come if she agreed to marry far away. Fear and doubt filled her heart. The thought of leaving everything she knew, the fields, the village, her parents, even her few friends, was terrifying. But she also knew that her family needed help. Her mother's hands were worn and sore from constant work, and her father's shoulders ached from carrying the weight of life. She could see the worry in their eyes. She could feel the pull of duty, stronger than her fear. Reluctantly, she agreed to meet the broker in person and hear what he had to say. The broker spoke kindly, explaining that she would be leaving for a new life, one where she could help her family and also build a home of her own. She listened, trying to focus on the practical details, but her mind was full of questions and doubts. Would she be wanted? Would she be loved? Would she be happy? She did not voice these questions, for she felt that no one would answer them honestly. She had grown up believing that her quiet nature made her unremarkable, that no one desired her for who she was. In the following weeks, preparations began for her departure. She helped pack small belongings into a simple bag. She chose a few pieces of clothing, some personal items, and a small embroidered handkerchief her mother had made. Her parents tried to smile, but she could see the worry etched in their faces. Her father patted her head gently and said, "Be strong, my daughter. Do your best and do not forget us." Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "Remember, we love you." Always. The words made her chest tight and tears blurred her vision. When the day of departure arrived, she walked slowly to the small cart that would take her to the town where she would meet the ship or train to her new home. Villagers came to see her off, offering simple gifts and well wishes. Some looked at her with sympathy, others with curiosity. She felt a mixture of shame and hope. She was leaving because she was wanted somewhere in a way, but she wondered if it was true desire or simply necessity. The journey was long and exhausting. She traveled through towns and cities, each unfamiliar and strange. The language, though somewhat similar to her own dialect, sounded different. The people she saw seemed distant and cold compared to the warmth of her village. Nights were the hardest. Alone in her small cabin on the train or ship, she thought of her family, her home, and the life she was leaving behind. Doubts gnawed at her. What if she was not wanted? What if the man waiting for her did not care about her as a person? Finally, she arrived at the place she would call home for the next chapter of her life, a distant land with wide fields, dusty roads, and a small house surrounded by open land. Here, she met the man who would be her husband. He was quiet and reserved, with rough hands and a gentle face. He lived alone on a ranch far from the nearest town. At first, she could not read him. Was he kind? Was he lonely? Was he patient? She had learned to expect little, to hope less. She watched him carefully, noticing the way he moved, how he spoke, and how he treated her. Their first days together were awkward. He tried to make her comfortable, showing her the small rooms, the kitchen, and the animals on the ranch. She nodded politely, spoke little, and kept her thoughts to herself. She wondered if she had made a mistake coming so far. The language barrier made simple communication difficult. Yet there were small gestures of kindness. A hand offered to help her carry water, a gentle word, a smile that lingered longer than expected. These small acts made her heart flutter, though she tried to hide it. She began to understand the rhythms of ranch life. Feeding the animals, carrying water, cleaning the house, and working in the fields became her new daily routine. Her hands, already strong from childhood labor, adapted quickly. She found pride in the work, even if it was tiring. She also noticed that the rancher worked tirelessly beside her, never asking for much but always ensuring that she had what she needed. Slowly, a sense of familiarity began to grow. Despite the comfort of routine, she often lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her life. She questioned herself constantly. Did he truly want her? Was she loved? Was she just another obligation, a solution to his loneliness? She had left home because she felt unwanted, but here, in this distant land, she began to feel a faint glimmer of possibility. Perhaps, she thought, she could be more than a quiet, unnoticed girl. Perhaps she could be someone who mattered. Time passed and small changes began to appear. The rancher spoke a little more each day, asking about her comfort, her preferences, and her feelings. She answered cautiously, her voice soft but steady. She noticed that he remembered details she mentioned, small things like her favorite meal or the way she liked her tea. These attentions, though simple, were powerful. They were the first hints that someone might truly care about her, not out of duty, not for convenience, but because they wanted to. By the end of several weeks, she began to understand something important. She was no longer just the quiet girl from a poor village. She was part of a home, part of a life that she was helping to shape. She could see that she mattered, that her presence was appreciated, and that she could bring happiness into someone else's life. Though she still struggled with self-doubt, a small seed of confidence began to grow. She began to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be loved. And though she did not yet know it, this was only the beginning. The life ahead would challenge her, teach her, and show her the meaning of true care. She had crossed oceans, left home, and stepped into the unknown. And in this quiet, distant place, she was about to discover that the world could hold more than fear and loneliness. It could hold hope, kindness, and even love. Life on the ranch was very different from anything she had ever known. The wide fields stretched endlessly under the open sky, the wind carrying the scent of grass, soil, and animals. The small house, though humble, felt like a fortress in this vast, quiet land. At first, the young woman felt lost and out of place. Every task was new, every sound foreign. The animals were unpredictable and the work was harder than anything she had done back home. But slowly she began to adjust. The rancher, the man she had come to marry, watched her carefully. He did not rush her or force her into work beyond her strength. Instead, he guided her gently, showing her how to feed the animals, mend fences, and carry water from the well. He spoke little, but his words were clear and purposeful. At first, she felt his silence was a barrier, but she soon realized it was a form of respect. He allowed her to learn at her own pace. The mornings were the hardest. She woke early when the sky was still dark and worked until the sun climbed high into the sky. She milked the cows, swept the barn, and gathered eggs from the chickens. She learned the sounds of the animals, their habits, and how to care for them properly. At first, mistakes were common. She spilled water, stepped on a chicken's foot, or dropped hay on the floor. Each time she felt embarrassment and fear, but the rancher never scolded her. He only showed her the correct way, repeating instructions patiently until she understood. At noon, they ate together in silence most days. Meals were simple: rice, vegetables, sometimes meat if the rancher had managed to hunt or trade for it. She noticed how he ate quietly, taking small bites, careful not to waste food. Sometimes he would ask her opinion about something, and though she was shy at first, she began to answer. She realized he wanted to hear her thoughts, not just her obedience. It was strange but comforting. She began to see him as more than just a provider or a stranger. He was someone who wanted to understand her. The afternoons were long. She learned to work the land, water the crops, and repair fences broken by wind or animals. Her hands, already strong from years of labor in her village, grew even stronger. Bruises and scratches became part of her daily life. The rancher often worked beside her, doing the heaviest tasks while offering help when she struggled. His presence was quiet but steady, like a shadow that followed without pressing. She began to feel a strange sense of security, even in the vast openness that once made her anxious. The evenings were her favorite part of the day. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, she and the rancher would sit outside, resting after a long day. Sometimes they did not speak, only watching the horizon and listening to the wind. Other times, he would tell stories about his past, about the ranch, and about why he had chosen to live so far from towns and people. She listened carefully, absorbing every word, feeling a little closer to him with each story. Despite the slow comfort she found in routine, she often felt lonely. She missed her family terribly, the laughter of her siblings, her mother's cooking, and even the familiar sounds of her village. Letters from home were rare and often delayed, which made her heart ache with longing. She wrote letters whenever she could, describing her life on the ranch and asking about their health. She feared they might be disappointed or miss her too much, but she had no choice. She was far away, living a life she had once thought impossible. The language barrier was another challenge. The rancher spoke slowly and simply, trying to help her understand, but certain words and expressions were difficult for her to grasp. She often nodded politely, pretending to understand when she did not. At first, this made her anxious, fearing that mistakes could cause problems. But over time, she found ways to communicate, gestures, pointing, and eventually a few words in his language that she learned. Communication remained limited, but something deeper began to grow. Trust, though fragile, started to take root. She noticed small acts of care from the rancher, leaving warm water for her bath, repairing her shoes when they wore out, and remembering the things she liked to eat. These gestures, though simple, spoke louder than words. She began to feel seen, valued, and not just as a worker or a wife in name. She realized that for the first time in her life, someone was noticing her, not for appearances, but for who she was. At the same time, the rancher noticed her growing confidence. He had chosen a quiet, hard-working life, thinking no one would ever understand it, but she adapted quickly, learning tasks he had done for years. She brought energy and care into the house and fields, making things run smoother. He respected her strength and patience, even if he did not express it often. Slowly, the silence between them became comfortable, filled with a mutual understanding that did not always require words. One day, a storm arrived suddenly. The sky turned dark, Winds howled across the open fields and rain poured down in heavy sheets. She was worried about the animals, especially the cows in the barn. Together, she and the rancher worked through the storm, securing fences, moving animals to safer areas and covering supplies. She was soaked, exhausted, and frightened, but he stayed close, guiding her and offering reassurance with his calm presence. By the end of the storm, she realized that she could trust him completely in moments of danger. His concern for her was genuine. Evenings after the storm were quiet and reflective. They sat by the small fire inside the house, warming their hands and drying off. The rancher spoke softly, telling her stories about his life before the ranch, about the mistakes he had made, and the people he had lost. She listened, feeling a connection to him she had never expected. It was strange to think that someone so different from her, living so far away from her home, could feel like a kindred spirit. She began to wonder if she could ever feel affection beyond respect for him. Slowly, small moments of joy began to appear. A shared smile over a simple meal, laughter at a clumsy mistake, or quiet companionship during the evening became precious. She discovered that life on the ranch, though hard, offered freedom and purpose she had never known. She was needed, not just as a helper but as part of a life that had meaning. She realized that strength and care could build bonds even when words were few. She also noticed subtle changes in herself. She spoke more, laughed more, and even dared to ask questions or express opinions. She learned to trust her instincts and abilities. The rancher, in turn, seemed to relax around her, showing small hints of emotion he rarely displayed with anyone else. Though the bond was quiet, it was steady and growing. She began to understand that connection could exist without grand gestures. Sometimes it was built quietly, day by day, through shared work, care, and attention. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence, the rancher spoke more openly than before. He shared memories of his parents, of growing up alone on the ranch, and of the loneliness that had led him to seek a simple life away from towns and people. She listened carefully, feeling the weight of his words. She realized that he, too, had struggles and fears just like her. For the first time, she felt they were equals in their vulnerabilities. This realization changed how she saw him and herself. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. She learned the rhythms of ranch life and found pride in her work. She began to enjoy small pleasures, the sound of the wind in the fields, the warmth of sunlight on her face, and the quiet presence of someone who had slowly become more than just a man she married. She understood that life on the ranch, though lonely at first, offered a chance to grow, to learn, and to be seen. The young woman also discovered a growing curiosity about the man she lived with. She noticed the way he moved, the care he took in small tasks, and the rare smiles that lit his face. She began to wonder about his thoughts and feelings, wishing she could know him more deeply. At the same time, she feared revealing too much of herself, afraid that he might not care. But the quiet consistency of his actions reassured her. He did care, even if words were rare. By the end of her first year on the ranch, she had changed in ways she could not have imagined. She was stronger, more confident, and capable of facing challenges that once terrified her. She had learned the value of patience, hard work, and quiet trust. And most importantly, she had begun to understand that human connection was not about grand declarations, but about small, steady acts of kindness, care, and attention. The bond between her and the rancher, though still delicate, had grown into something meaningful. She could see that he respected her, appreciated her presence, and was slowly opening his heart to her. She, in turn, began to feel that perhaps she could love someone, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The thought was both exciting and frightening. She began to dream, quietly, of a future on the ranch. She imagined herself walking through the fields, tending animals and sharing life with someone who had shown her kindness in ways no one ever had before. For the first time in her life, she felt that she was not invisible, not unwanted, and not a burden. She was seen, appreciated, and slowly, in ways too gentle to name yet loved. The ranch had grown quiet as the seasons slowly changed. Autumn had arrived, painting the fields in gold and amber, and the air carried a crisp chill that hinted at winter. The young woman, now more confident in her tasks, moved through her daily routine with a steady rhythm. The animals knew her touch, the fences were stronger because of her care, and the house felt more like a home than it ever had. Yet, despite her growing comfort, a part of her still carried a quiet unease. She often wondered about the future, about the man she lived with, and about whether she would ever truly feel loved. The rancher noticed this restlessness, though he never asked directly. He understood that trust and affection could not be forced, only nurtured. He continued his quiet support, offering small gestures that spoke louder than words. He would leave freshly baked bread on the table, mend tools she had broken, or simply stand beside her while she worked, silently providing encouragement. These acts, though simple, slowly broke down the walls she had built around her heart. One evening, after a long day of gathering firewood, they sat outside under the fading light. The sky was a canvas of pink and orange, and the wind carried the earthy scent of the land. The young woman leaned against the wooden railing of the porch, feeling tired but content. The rancher joined her, placing a hand near hers, not touching, just close enough to share the quiet. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was full of understanding and shared presence. Finally he spoke, his voice low and steady. "Do you ever think about why you came here?" he asked. She hesitated, unsure how to answer. She had spent months trying to understand her own feelings, trying to make sense of the life she had left behind and the life she was now living. I came because I had to," she said softly. "For my family. For duty." She looked down at her hands folded in her lap. "But I did not expect this." Only sincerity, quiet but undeniable. Her heart began to race, a mixture of hope and fear swirling inside her. For the first time, she felt the possibility of being truly seen. Someone was not just tolerating her presence, not just appreciating her work, but noticing her as a person, her thoughts, her fears, and her quiet strength. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, unsure how to respond. Words felt inadequate, and yet her heart was full of unspoken emotion. Over the next few days, their connection deepened. The rancher shared stories of his past, how he had grown up alone, how he had learned to depend on no one, and how loneliness had shaped his life. She listened carefully, offering small words of comfort, sharing her own fears and memories. Each story, each confession brought them closer. She realized that they were not just two people living together. They were two souls learning to trust and care for one another. One evening, after a long day of repairing a broken fence, they sat by the fire inside the house. The flames cast flickering shadows on the walls and the wind howled outside. She was tired, her hands rough and sore from labor, but a quiet contentment settled in her chest. The rancher spoke softly, recounting a memory of his childhood, and she laughed lightly, a sound that seemed to surprise both of them. It was a small moment, but it carried a weight she could not ignore. As the night grew darker, the rancher grew quiet, his eyes reflecting the firelight. He seemed to be gathering courage, and she felt a sudden tension in the air. Then, in a voice so low she barely heard it, he asked, "Will you marry me?" Not as a formal question, not as a request driven by obligation, but as a sincere offer of choice and companionship. The words hung in the air like a delicate promise. She froze, her heart pounding so loudly she feared he could hear it. She had left home believing she was unwanted, invisible, and perhaps even unlovable. And yet, here was someone, a man she had come to respect and care for, asking for her, not as a duty, not as a transaction, but because he wanted her. The simplicity and honesty of the question struck her with a force she could not resist. Tears blurred her vision as emotions she had long buried surfaced. Fear, hope, gratitude, and love mingled together, making it difficult to speak. She wanted to say yes, wanted to embrace this new possibility, but doubt and caution held her back for a moment. What if she was wrong? What if he did not truly care? But then she remembered the months of quiet support, the small acts of kindness, and the patient presence he had offered. She realized that his words matched his actions, and that gave her courage. Finally, she whispered a soft yes, her voice trembling but sincere. Relief and joy washed over them both. He reached out, taking her hand gently, and for the first time they allowed themselves to share a moment of true closeness. It was not a dramatic declaration or a passionate embrace. It was quiet, steady, and full of meaning. In that moment, she felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. She was seen, desired, and chosen. The days that followed were filled with a new sense of connection. The young woman carried herself differently, not with the nervousness and fear of before, but with quiet confidence. She understood that love could grow slowly, through patience, trust, and shared life. The rancher, in turn, began to show more warmth and openness. He smiled more freely, spoke more often, and allowed himself to be vulnerable in ways he had never shown anyone. They continued their daily routines, but now every shared task carried a deeper meaning. Feeding the animals, repairing fences, cooking meals, and walking through the fields were no longer just chores. They were acts of partnership. Each moment spent together strengthened their bond, making their home on the ranch a place of safety, care, and quiet joy. She began to dream of the future with a new sense of hope. She imagined planting a small garden, raising animals, and building a life together with the rancher. She thought of the seasons ahead, of mornings and evenings spent side by side, and of the quiet laughter and shared memories that would fill the house. For the first time, she felt that life held possibilities beyond mere survival. She could love, be loved, and belong. The rancher, too, reflected on their life together. He had chosen a quiet existence, believing that no one would ever truly understand him. Yet this young woman, far from home and alone in a foreign land, had entered his life with patience, strength, and quiet courage. He realized that he had not only found a companion but someone who made him want to be better, to open his heart fully. Their relationship, built on respect and trust, had grown into a deep bond neither had expected. As winter approached, the ranch felt warmer than ever. The house was filled with the soft glow of lanterns, the smell of home-cooked meals, and the quiet comfort of companionship. Outside, the wind howled, snow began to fall, and the fields lay silent under a white blanket. Inside, however, there was warmth, safety, and love. The young woman and the rancher had created a life together, one that balanced hard work with quiet joy, isolation with connection, and fear with trust. She often thought back to her childhood, to the days when she felt unwanted and invisible. She remembered the fear and loneliness she had carried across oceans. And yet now, she understood that those struggles had prepared her for this life. She had learned patience, resilience, and the quiet strength needed to build a home with someone who truly valued her. The past no longer weighed her down. It had shaped her into the person capable of receiving and giving love. The rancher, in turn, reflected on the journey they had shared. He had once believed that his life of solitude was enough, that companionship was unnecessary. But through her presence, he had learned the depth of connection, the beauty of trust, and the quiet joy of shared life. He realized that love could be gentle and slow, yet profound and enduring. Together, they faced the seasons, the storms, and the simple routines of ranch life. Each day brought challenges, but also opportunities for care, understanding, and growth. The young woman no longer feared rejection or invisibility. She had found someone who valued her, who asked for her presence, and who offered her a choice, love freely given, not demanded. And so, life on the ranch continued, transformed by a single moment, a whisper in the quiet evening that changed everything. The young woman had discovered that she was not unwanted, that love could arrive softly, and that a life built on trust, respect, and patience could be more beautiful than she had ever imagined. She and the rancher continued together, learning, caring, and quietly building a bond that would endure through all seasons. Winter passed slowly, and the ranch transformed under the gentle touch of spring. The snow melted, leaving the earth wet and soft. Small shoots of green appeared among the brown fields, and the animals returned to their routines with renewed energy. The young woman, now fully adapted to life on the ranch, moved through her daily work with quiet confidence. Every task, from feeding the animals to repairing fences, was familiar and satisfying. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more assured in herself. The rancher had also changed. The quiet man who once spoke little now shared small pieces of his thoughts and feelings. He laughed more easily, and his eyes held a warmth that had not been there before. Together, they had built a rhythm in their lives, simple, steady, and fulfilling. Their home, though modest, radiated a sense of life and care that had been missing when she first arrived. Each corner reflected their efforts: repaired fences, a tidy kitchen, and animals that were well-fed and healthy. With spring came new challenges. The land needed preparation for planting, and the animals required extra attention. She worked alongside the rancher, learning to anticipate his actions and intentions without speaking. Their movements became synchronized. He handled the heavier tasks while she managed the smaller, delicate ones. It was a partnership, built not on words, but on understanding, trust, and shared responsibility. The rancher often paused to smile at her, a quiet recognition of her skill and dedication. She returned the gesture with a shy but genuine smile, feeling proud of her place in this life. One morning, as the sun rose over the fields, the young woman walked to the edge of the pasture. She paused, looking at the land that stretched endlessly before her. She thought of her home in China, of the family she had left behind, and of the long journey that had brought her here. A sense of peace filled her. She realized she had found more than survival in this foreign land. She had found purpose, respect, and belonging. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had led her to a life she could embrace fully. The rancher joined her silently, standing beside her as they watched the sun climb higher. "The land looks good this year," he said quietly. She nodded, feeling the truth of his words. Together, they would tend it carefully, ensuring that crops grew strong and animals thrived. The work would be hard, but they faced it together, side by side. There was comfort in knowing that she was no longer alone in the challenges of life. As the months passed, small joys appeared in their daily life. They planted seeds together, watered the fields, and watched as green shoots pushed through the soil. The young woman learned to anticipate the needs of the animals, noticing subtle changes in their behavior that indicated illness or discomfort. The rancher, in turn, grew to rely on her judgment and skill. Their trust in each other deepened, forming a bond that was strong, steady, and enduring. One afternoon, while gathering eggs from the chicken coop, she paused to reflect. The life she had once imagined, quiet, unseen, and unimportant, was gone. She had discovered that strength and courage were not measured by words alone, but by daily action and resilience. She had learned that love could arrive gently, quietly, and without fanfare. Most importantly, she had realized that she mattered, not only to the rancher but to herself. Their evenings became moments of shared reflection and quiet joy. They would sit by the fireplace, speaking softly, laughing at small mistakes, or simply enjoying the warmth of each other's presence. The young woman had never known such comfort. She remembered her early days on the ranch, when she had felt fear, doubt, and loneliness. Now she understood that those emotions had prepared her for this life, teaching her patience, empathy, and the quiet strength necessary to build a home. The rancher, too, reflected on the journey they had shared. He had once believed that solitude was enough, that companionship was unnecessary. But through her presence, he had learned the depth of human connection. He realized that partnership was built on small, consistent acts of care, and that love was not always loud or dramatic. It could be gentle, quiet, and steadfast, growing stronger with each passing day. As summer approached, they faced new challenges: the heat of the sun, the care of animals in the fields, and the constant work of maintaining the ranch. Yet they met these challenges together, with patience and mutual respect. Each day became a lesson in cooperation and understanding. When mistakes occurred, They worked through them without anger or blame, learning to trust one another even more. Their home became a sanctuary, a place where both felt safe, valued, and seen. The young woman began to explore new ways to contribute to the ranch. She planted a small garden, experimenting with vegetables and herbs. She learned to cook new meals, using ingredients from the land. The rancher, impressed by her creativity and care, began to involve her in more decisions about the ranch. She felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. Her confidence grew, and with it, her love for the life she had built. One evening, after a long day of tending the fields, the rancher spoke softly. "You have done more than I could have hoped," he said, his voice filled with quiet admiration. "You have made this place a home." She felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had long feared being unwanted, unseen, or unappreciated. Now she realized that her presence mattered deeply. She had found not only acceptance, but love, respect, and belonging. Seasons continued to change, and with them their life grew richer. Autumn returned, bringing golden fields and crisp air. Winter followed, covering the land in snow once more. Throughout it all, they faced each challenge together, learning to rely on one another and to cherish the simple joys of shared life. Their bond grew stronger with each passing season, rooted in trust, patience, and quiet care. Over time, the young woman found herself thinking less about the past and more about the future. She imagined a life filled with love, companionship, and purpose. She envisioned raising animals, tending crops, and building a home filled with warmth and laughter. Most importantly, she imagined a life where she was valued, wanted, and seen, not as a burden, but as a partner, a friend, and a beloved companion. The rancher, too, dreamed quietly of the future. He thought about the life they had built together, about the bond that had grown slowly through shared work and quiet gestures of care. He knew that the love between them was not loud or dramatic, but steady, resilient, and enduring. It was the kind of love that could withstand storms, seasons, and the challenges of life on the land. As years passed, their home became a place of warmth and stability. The animals thrived, the fields flourished, and the house echoed with laughter and quiet conversation. They celebrated small victories together, the first shoots of a new crop, the birth of a calf, the repair of a fence after a storm. Each success was shared, each challenge faced together, strengthening the bond between them. The young woman often thought about her journey from a small village in China to this distant land. She remembered the fear, loneliness, and uncertainty she had carried with her. She remembered leaving her family, crossing oceans, and stepping into the unknown. And yet she realized that every struggle had led her to this life, a life filled with purpose, connection, and love. She had discovered that being chosen, valued, and respected was possible, even in a place far from home. The rancher, too, reflected on their journey. He had chosen a life of solitude, believing that no one could understand or share it. But through her presence, he had learned the power of trust, patience, and quiet companionship. He realized that life was richer when shared with someone who cared deeply and acted with sincerity. Together, they had built a home, a partnership, and a life that neither had imagined possible when they first met. As the sun set on another day, painting the fields with shades of gold and amber, they stood together on the porch, looking out over the land. The young woman felt a sense of peace she had never known. She had found a place where she belonged, a life where she mattered, and a love that was steady, sincere, and enduring. She realized that the journey from fear and doubt to belonging and love had been long, but it had led her to exactly where she needed to be. The rancher stood beside her, quiet but present. He did not need to speak. Their shared glance and gentle touch said more than words ever could. Together, they faced the future, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them as partners, friends, and companions. The young woman had found her home, her purpose, and her place in the world. She had discovered that she was never truly unwanted, only waiting to be seen, valued, and loved. And so, life on the ranch continued, filled with work, laughter, quiet reflection, and enduring love. Together, they faced the seasons, nurtured the land, and grew stronger as a pair. They had built a life from patience, kindness, and trust, a life that proved that love could arrive quietly, gently, and persistently, transforming two lives into one shared story. She had crossed oceans to find her place, and in the end she had discovered that home was not just a location, but a feeling, a life shared with someone who truly saw her, cared for her, and chose her every day.